Hello, everyone. Bon après-midi. Bienvenue. Welcome to the Blue Metropolis Violet Literary Prize ceremony. I hope that you have been enjoying the festival so far. Thank you for being here with us as we celebrate the legendary career of renowned writer, filmmaker, and visual artist, Shani Mootoo. Let's give her a round of applause. My name is Christopher DiRaddo. I am the founder and host of the Violet Hour Literary Series and Book Club, which has been celebrating and uplifting classic and contemporary works of Tous LGBTQ+ literature in Montreal for about 12 years now. Thank you. I'm also the co-founder of this prize, which we will be bestowing today to Shani. It was created in 2018. And it's the first literary prize in Canada to recognize the contributions that Tous LGBTQ+ writers have made to literature in Canada. So we're not talking about a book, we're talking about a whole career. The career prize alternates every year between someone who writes in English and someone who writes in French. And it comes with a $5,000 purse made possible due to the generosity of Mark Gallop. Louise and Maziak, who is the chair of the board of directors at Blue Metropolis, and Blue Metropolis' artistic director and CEO, William St. Hilaire. So thank you for your contributions and for your belief in this year's in the prize. Blue Metropolis has been supporting Tous LGBTQ+ writers for 28 years now. And in addition to this event, there are many others this year that feature queer and trans authors, and I invite you to check them out. All right. So today, Shani Mootoo joins Nicole Brassard, Dion Brand, André Roy, Thompson Highway, Michelle Marc Bouchard, Sky Gilbert, and France Degg in the winner's circle. The jury for this year's prize was composed of writers John Barton, Anuja Varghese, and Eva Crocker, who will be speaking with Shani in just a few minutes here on the stage. Here is what the three of them had to say about her work. Shani Mootoo's impacts on the Canadian literary landscape have been nothing short of groundbreaking. For over 3 decades, she's engaged fearlessly in crafting fiction and poetry that delve into queer desire, exploring intersections of sexuality, class, and race with clarity, empathy, and lyrical mastery. From her first novel, published in 1996, the critically acclaimed Cereus Blooms at Night, to her most recent work, published in 2025, the rich and revelatory Starry Starry Night, Shani has never stopped pushing boundaries. Her body of work is significant, spanning 10 books to date, and the unique ways she has articulated the complexity of queer lives therein has deeply enriched our national literature. Given that Shani began her career at a time when LGBTQ+ representation was still very much a risk for publishers, her perseverance and influence over the years and across genres has undoubtedly opened new doors for other queer writers of color. Shani has also demonstrated an inspiring commitment to nurturing a diverse and inclusive literary community, serving as writer-in-residence at institutions across the country, serving on the jury for the Writers' Trust of Canada's Dane Ogilvie Prize for Emerging LGBTQ+ Writers, and serving as a mentor with Diaspora Dialogues. This year's Blue Metropolis Violet Literary Prize recognizes Shani as a trailblazer for queer voices and stories, and we are so pleased to honor her with this award. So I'm going to ask Louise and Maziak to join me on stage. And I'd invite you all to give a big round of applause as we award the 2026 Blue Metropolis Violet Literary Prize to Shani Mootoo. Shani, please come up on stage. Okay, now on to the interview. Shani will be interviewed on stage by Eva Crocker. I'll just bring this back up. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Shani, yes. My apologies. Yeah, Shani.
That's why I so that you can say a few words about the prize. I'm expected to speak without bursting into tears. This is extremely moving for me. I've been given a number of awards in the past, and for some reason, well, I think you might know why, this award is incredibly special for me. I never intended to be a lesbian writer. I just really like writing, and I write from my experience, deeply from my experience. Knowing very well that the work might meet resistance, but I did it anyway. And the life meets resistance, but I live it and I love it anyway. And to be awarded for something that I do at some risk, have done at some risk, is quite amazing. So I really, really appreciate it. Eva and the other jurors, thank you so much for your words. And I really want to thank, oh, they've disappeared. The three funders and the Violet Prize, Chris, for this award. It's kind of amazing that in all of my life in Canada, this is the first award, and so very, very important and necessary. I was a juror a few years ago, 3 years ago, and when I was asked to be a juror, and then when I was considering what this jury was about, I just thought this is perhaps one of the most important awards. I understand what it is, and it makes, I'm so, so pleased to receive it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shani. So we're going to pass to an interview right now, and then afterwards there's going to be a bit of a Q&A, so if you've got some questions, there'll be time at the end. I'm going to introduce now who'll be speaking to Shani on stage, Eva Crocker. Eva, do you want to come join us up on stage? In addition to sitting on the jury for the prize, Eva is the author of 2 novels, Back in the Land of the Living and All I Ask, which won the 2020 BMO Winterset Award. Her short story collection, Barreling Forward, was shortlisted for the Dane Ogilvy Prize for Emerging LGBTQS2 Writers and the NLCU Fresh Fish Award for Emerging Writers. Woo! It won the Alistair MacLeod Award for Short Fiction and the CCA Emerging Authors Award. Her new short story collection, Bargain, 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 will be published by McClellan & Stewart in 2026. She is a PhD candidate in Concordia University's Interdisciplinary Humanities program, where she is studying visual arts about resource extraction products in Newfoundland. So now over to the two of you. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Chris. Shani, it's such an honor to get to speak to you about your work. I'm a huge fan, and that was a really moving speech. Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about Starry Starry Night, which is for sale, and I think Shani's going to be signing some books afterwards as well, so if you don't already have a copy, you should absolutely do that. And after my questions, I'm going to open it up to the audience, so you can think about what you'd like to ask as well. I think in this book, you balance the kind of breathless intensity of a child's propulsive stream of consciousness with these really rich, vivid descriptions of Anjou's sensory experience of the world. And I was hoping you might be able to talk about the voice of the novel and how you approached writing from the perspective of a child.
Thank you. It's a really good question. The thing that comes to me fastest to understand why I was able to do it is that when I'm going to give away a little bit. The book is not a mystery, or there's no. I remember when I handed it to my agent, and she said, "But it needs an arc." And I said, "Actually, no, I'm writing against that. And there is no resolution. The resolution is probably me now, today." And I wanted to try to understand why I would remember so very much. My family is always saying, "How come you remember that? From 4 years old you remember?" I think, it's a traumatic beginning that ends not too badly, so don't worry. I was born in Ireland, but my Trinidad parents were in Ireland because my father was studying medicine there. And when I was born, they took me back to Trinidad. They took me to Trinidad to live with my grandparents, and then they came back for me when I was 4. I had no idea who they were, and I was taken to live with them. So, at 4 years old, I had this bond with my grandparents, and then suddenly it was broken to go with these people I didn't know. When something traumatic happens in childhood, one can forget about it in order to survive, or one can remember in order to survive. And I do remember the details. At the same time, I was very fortunate to have a couple members of my siblings who were very quick. One, has to be careful when you're writing these kinds of things. Family members sometimes don't want you to write. But they were very quick when they understood what I was doing to send photographs and to correct me and say, "Well, it didn't happen that way. This is how it happened." So I was very, very fortunate. And the trick in writing the book from a 4-year-old child's perspective to 12 years old, and it's not a children's book, this is an adult's book for reading, is there are a couple things. One is getting the child's perspective and language to grow, and that was one of my wonderful challenges. And the other one was to always remember there's an adult reader who is doing the analysis that the child can't do. The child is simply observing. The child is an observer. She's seeing everything. But it is the adult reader who knows what the child actually is seeing. So,
yeah, I think there's something really powerful about the way you capture how children sense and understand things on a kind of intuitive level without maybe having an intellectual understanding of what's going on. That's really powerful. And I was wondering, because I think one of the places where that really comes through is in the descriptions of what's happening in Trinidad and the political moment. And I'm curious what made you want to write about that moment right now, or how you feel like it resonates with the present, or if that is how, if that was part of the decision to write this story right now.
I think the changing circumstances of the family and the child were really important, and the political situation, because my father, he got involved in politics, and it really changed the dynamic between him and my mother and changed our lives as children. So it's very much part of the story. But that's the adult writer understanding what was happening in Trinidad at the time, but having to write it, having to leave out the politics and write it from the point of view of the child seeing things like the the cars during election time with the PA systems on top, and hearing the voices of the politicians of the different parties saying, "This is the voice of the PLM," and giving these little speeches. Seeing things like the car that the family is traveling in, stopping, the father jumps out and the mother is saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Get back in here." And he's saying, "No, no, no, I have to say hello to the politician." And you realize, oh no, something's about to happen now, and it carries on. So, but the thing is, I'm an adult writer, so I know what is going on. I always have to straddle the writing, staying in the child's voice, speaking to the adult reader, but never leaving that child's voice. I always feel as if, I started writing this book. It wasn't a book. I started scribbling these notes that were harassing me 35 years ago before I began to write. And the writing a novel fell into my hands by accident. I didn't mean to be a writer. But in between every book that came afterwards, I always went back to this thing that I was scribbling. And I really do feel that it took learning through writing the last 9 books how to write this one.
Wow. I wanted to ask, I was curious, earlier you said that maybe some siblings and family members had moments of saying, "That's not how it happened." And the book has been described as autofiction. I'm curious how you feel about that term or how it applies to this work.
Well, I actually asked my publisher, I said, "We can't call this a novel. There's so much that is true about it." And they put novel on the front of it, right? Because there isn't really a sales mechanism here for the idea of autofiction on a book. But I said, we can't call this fiction. We can't call it a novel, really, and it is not a memoir. I've bridged absolute truth with my love of storytelling. Whatever I couldn't remember, I made it up. But the incidents are absolutely real, and it's the bridging parts. How did we get from here to here? I have a memory, I have a very clear memory of when we were living in a house after my parents, when they arrived from from Ireland to Trinidad, and I had to go to live with them. And they moved from my grandparents' house, my mother's parents' house, and they were living in, they got a house that was a transition house. Well, actually, that's not the word, that's a different meaning today. But it was a house from which they would dream into another kind of life. And they insisted on leaving because Daddy wanted to be independent. And I have this memory of downstairs, the maid screaming from her room, and us all running down. And I don't remember how it happened, but all I remember is the yard man with a snake on a cutlass. And he had it in the air, and the snake was in the shape of maybe the letter 3, and it had been killed, and he flung it over. I think, those kinds of things. I love writing that, how that happened, and there are lots of those little bridges.
It's so vivid, and I think it brings up all these reflections about how memory works. In Caribbean Beat this month, the airline magazine, the Airlines magazine, there's a review of the book, and the writer, who's Trinidadian, said that it was a love letter to Trinidad. She's so right. Well, the descriptions of the place are really striking. How did you write those? You weren't there as you were writing it, but you were thinking back to it?
So, for a lot of reasons, some of which I just gave you. And realizing from very young that I was different in a few ways than my family. One of which was, when I was very young, I wrote a poem. I was about 7 years old. Always trying to find ways to make these people connect with me, these people, my family, my parents. And some of the words that I wrote were, at the end of the poem, it was a very idealistic poem. Terrible poem, but coconut trees silhouetted against the sunset and this and that, you know. But the last few lines were, man loves woman, man loves man, woman loves woman, which to me made a lot of sense. But in a place like Trinidad, no, absolutely not. And my mother just cried. She cried. They called me into the bedroom and they asked me to explain that. I didn't know how to explain it. We didn't have words for any form of queerness. But I learned very fast from that this thing that seemed so natural to me was wrong. And so, and my parents had a lot of conflict because my father was quite a charming man and quite a good philanderer. He was very, very good at it. And this caused difficulties in my parents' life. Mommy didn't want to be involved in politics, you know, as a wife, and Daddy, he did. So there was all of that. There was so much chaos in the house that my safe place was either in books that I could not understand. We had a fabulous library at one time. I could not understand the books, but I read them. And the other place was outside. Outside. The garden, the plants, the birds. When I was very young, I could tell you the name of every plant that was not a tamed garden plant. I could tell you the names of the birds. I was in love with that place. And when that place did not love me for writing Serious Blooms at Night, I felt like I just kept writing to them. Just kept writing back to Trinidad all the time. And it's a place that I love deeply. Yeah, that's it.
That's so moving. I wanted to ask about the role of gender in the book, and Anjou, you know, likes to play with boys. She kind of covertly introduces herself as Andrew when it feels safe to do it. And at one point she says, everyone thinks I'm a girl, but when I grow up I will be a boy, and Colin and Sheldon will let me be the leader. Tara doesn't play with us, so she doesn't know girls get captured and die. I have this feeling I'm not going to get anything I want. More and more it seems to be this way. Everything is confusing, but I'm not sure if I'm the one who's confused or if everyone else is confused. And we kind of see her struggling to come to terms with this discord between how she understands herself and how everyone else understands her. And that, to me, is also one of those moments where she feels something that she maybe doesn't understand intellectually yet, but the weight of it is there. And I was wondering how you were thinking about gender as you were writing.
As I was writing?
Or,
yeah.
Well,
I mean, at this point, writing it, and writing it from the point of view as a child, it's really trying to explain from the point of view of a child something that a child knows and intuits and, you know, but doesn't see any confirmation of around her. And I think the book is an attempt to understand that journey for me, not to understand it, sorry, but to write out the journey. And as I'm writing it out, I didn't have a plan for the book. I don't write with plans at all. I never know what's going to happen. You know, coming from a visual arts background, when I was asked to write a book, which was my very, very first book, I did not know what to do. So I used a performance piece by Johns. What's his first name? Jasper, thank you. Jasper Johns. How did you know that? By Jasper Johns. It's a performance piece that says, take an object, do something to it, do something else to it, do something that ad nauseum. And so I have an image in my head. I don't know where it's going. This is how I write all the time. And then that image makes the next image, makes the next image. And it's always images that I have to write out. I have to find the words for them. And then I go back, you know, and rewrite the back part, then I move forward, right? So I'm always moving back and forth. But the story, in a kind of a way, evolves on its own. And in writing this one, I didn't know what it was that I absolutely wanted to do, but I wanted to find the words in each instance, do something to it. I had to find the words that would speak to an experience. It's so interesting because the child didn't have the words, and I'm writing and giving her words. It's in her first person. It was a really tricky book to write. But all my books are tricky to write, and I love the challenges. Yeah.
Yes, well, even though it's so, you know, deeply in the perspective of a child in this really immersive way, we have the feeling that the writer is there crafting it and carrying us through, you know, which I feel is difficult to pull off. I've been reading Portrait of the Artist as a young man, and he does that same thing of the child's voice growing up throughout the book in a really interesting way that it was making me admire how they speak to each other in a certain way. But about the visual art, I wanted to ask, there's a painter who's an important figure in the book. And if there was someone in your life, an artist who inspired you or...
Pierre Garou?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I was about 7 years old, and we'd moved to another house, and this portrait painter was making his way through the Caribbean. He was from France, and the way he was paying for it was doing portraits of children. And one of my family's, my parents' friends, their children had portraits done of them. And he came, shall I tell the story? It's in the book. But it's
a very good story.
It's absolutely real. So I was drawing and painting. It's what I would do really quietly, and you know, it was one of my safe spaces. And he came, he set up everything. My grandparents had sent me from England. They were living in England. They had sent big books of big full portrait paintings, and in one of the Rembrandt paintings there's his easel, but I didn't know what it was, and there was this man, Pierre Garou. I don't know if I give him that name in the book, I don't remember, but his real name is Pierre Garou. He walked in with an easel, and it was like, here's a real artist setting up his materials in my parents' living room. And I set myself up to watch him as he painted the other kids, and I would walk behind him and I would look at how he used, I was using watercolors, he was using oil paint, he had canvases, it was the most amazing thing. And as he painted them, I walked around, and then it was my turn, and I got to see him go like this, and then come back like this, go like this, come back like this. When he was finished painting, or at some point my mother brought out my drawings to show him, which I almost died about. But he started to talk to her and say, well, she's very talented and you should encourage this. And when he was finished and he was packing up all his stuff, you know, we put his brushes in the linseed, in the turpentine, he cleaned them, he washed his rags, and he put the canvases in a bag. He put paints in a bag, but he left some out, and he left some brushes out and so. And he called over to me, and he said, you know, he's packing up, and he says something like, "Hold on to these for me." And he hands me a bunch of brushes, and I felt like he was handing me a bouquet. It was so special to be engaging with him. And then afterwards, he's packed up, and I said, "You've left some things." He said, "No, these are for you, these paints are for you, and these canvases are for you." And he told Mummy where to get books, and what books to teach me to mix colors and stuff like that. At 7 years old, I got my first oil paints. You know, I know that story, I wrote it, and I'm telling it to you, and I just feel so warm towards that man. I've never seen him again.
Yeah, was that a turning point for you? Do you think you may not have been an artist if you had not met him, or do you feel you always kind of knew that you would be an artist?
I can't tell that, but he made an impression on me. Yeah.
It's a great story. And some of your drawings are also in the book. I was curious.
No, those are my niece, who was 4 years old when she made those drawings. I flatter myself when I think she's a lot like me.
Uh-huh. That's interesting, because I was thinking about the inclusion. There's these amazing photographs and artwork in the book. And because you're playing with the genre of memoir and memory and truth, and
absolutely, yeah.
The photos in a way feel like evidence almost, or sometimes we think about them that way.
You're absolutely right.
So it's interesting that the drawings are not exactly as they seem. I mean, in this playful way, like, I think it's beautiful, the play between truth and fiction, and I wondered how you were thinking about that as you crafted the book.
Pierre Garou's portrait of me is in there, and it's the only one that is not really messed up a little bit. All the other photographs, it's kind of, I don't know who's read Austerlitz, a book that I really, really loved, is Seaworld. And it was the first book where I felt the inclusion of photographs and bits of photographs and where they're placed really worked to make you be sure and not sure at the same time. And when I was writing this, I felt I have to tell the reader in some kind of a way that this is memoir, but not. And the photographs, I use them like that, but I also had them worked by, I also do photography, and the man who works with me to complete my works, Mike Godard, he and I sat together, and he manipulated them to the point where some of the images are very distressed. Because my sister, who's a lawyer, said, "I don't think you should put those in just like that." And then she okayed it to say, they're distressed enough, you know. But what I wanted to say to the reader is, look, here's the evidence. You can tell. Look, I wrote about that in it, and it's clearly that's the photograph from it. But it's the child speaking. It's a child's voice, and this is the adult putting the photograph in. So yes, you're so right. You said it beautifully.
Another question I had was about kind of the role of family in the book. I feel like there's very interesting meditations on what makes a family and on obligation, and I was curious how those themes were coming to you as you were writing, or if you feel there's like a message about family in the book. Some people don't write to have a message, which I understand, but I'm curious.
Yeah, once again, you know, it is, while it's from the point of view of the child, it is an adult writing and interpreting, but always sifting away the adult language and adult ways of understanding and trying to translate that into how a child might say it. So, you know, sometimes children say things that kind of stun us as, oh my God, they saw that, they know that. But we're not supposed to say or know these things as adults, or we're supposed to know otherwise, or to have learned otherwise. And Anju sees when her grandmother, who she lived with and who loved her to death, when the parents came back, grandmother dies, and Anju has to learn in a harsh way. She learns it without ever speaking it. She understands deeply that she is not her grandmother's child. Well, she didn't even know it was her grandmother. She thought it was her mother, right? And she learns she is not to grieve in that way. Her mother, the one who came from Ireland, is actually the child. And when that mother is fainting and can't get on with life because her mother has died, Anju must step back. And that's kind of a grief for a child to carry, you know. And I remember the feelings, you know. I remember watching my mother at the coffin and me standing. I remember my grandfather coming around and holding me and saying, what are we going to do now? And he's really the only one who caught what was happening. Starry Starry Night, when I was a child, he would have me on his lap, and he'd call me out in the evening, and he would say, let's wait for the first star. Wait for the first star. Okay, we'll make a wish, and don't tell me what it is. And that's basically where the story came from, the title came from. But in a sense, it's how I lived my life, and perhaps in some ways how I still live my life.
Beautiful. And you talked about the kind of complicated adult-child relationships in the book, but there's also, I think, really interesting exploration of the relationships between children. And it's a time when you're kind of testing boundaries and learning what's right and what's wrong with each other. I think you capture that really movingly. How are you thinking about how children relate to each other as you were writing?
You know what I'm thinking right now?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that you read the book really nicely. and you interpreted it. You have interpreted it. You have interpreted things that I didn't spell out. I couldn't spell out as a child, but you've interpreted it. So
I'm glad.
Yeah, you did.
I felt that way. I did really love reading it.
Thank you. Yeah, so she's seeing things like, you know, there are also bits that I did not put into the book, and I don't know if I tell you this example, if I had put it in or not, I don't remember. But she sees things, or I saw things when I was growing up, like I went to the convent, St. Joseph's Convent in San Fernando, where there was a real separation of the white kids from the kids of color, the Indians, the Chinese, the blacks. And the white kids would take the best seats at break time under the mango tree, under the shade of the big spreading mango tree, and the rest of us had to sit in the sun. And I noticed these things, you know, so the difference between these children, and my father was a doctor, and the doctor to those children's families, the white children's families. So you're seeing all of these things. They would be invited to the white people's parties, but the white children would have their parties and wouldn't be invited, but we would be encouraged to invite them to ours. So that's one level, right? There's so many levels of the interaction between the kids and so on. So rich, rich, rich.
And what about between the siblings? There's also a lot to think about in terms of sibling relationships in the book.
Yeah. It's interesting to me now, as an adult, how my siblings now, who had been very uncomfortable when I came out, how they have come to really want to be with us, my partner and me, want us in everything that they do, and how they supported this book, and how their children have really taken this book to heart, and they want to know more of the family stories and so on. But at the time when I was writing about, I was the outsider. And the little one, the little girl who came from Ireland, she was always trying to bring me in. And it's interesting because she grew up with that intact family. So she was very secure. And for some reason, she was younger than I am, but for some reason she had the almost the sense to pull me in, to keep pulling me in. So it was as if I was the last child in the family, even though I was the firstborn. So there was that relationship. But they have come around so much since those days. So what's in the book is how it was. That's the truth of how it was. But if you read that as all that there is, there's a different story today. And part of that story is through the writing of all the books that they have been able to read and understand who this person is that is in their family.
It was very brave of you to share the book with them before it had even come out. Do you often share your work with people in your life before it's finished?
Only with my partner, and then one other person, Sheila Mayers, who reads and and corrects everything that I have gotten wrong. But just the two of them. This book I shared with my partner, with my siblings, with two of my siblings. Yeah, I didn't share it with the one who was going to have trouble with it. Why bother? So.
It's so special to have those people in your life who can read the early drafts,
yeah.
Your partner and your friend.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember being on stage one time at the Gay and Lesbian Archives in Toronto, and I was talking about being persona non grata in my family for so many years. Always being the one to call home and try to make contact with them. And one time, like for instance, my mother said, I said, how is everything? She said, well, my children are doing this, and she was talking about the other kids, and I just, but still I would call and I would call and I would call. And then somebody said, why would you do that? Family is like so troublesome to us and all of that. And I just kept thinking, I need this family. I need this family. And I feel like, I just feel so happy that I did that. Not everybody could do that. But I'm so happy that I did that, because the way they stand behind me now is unbelievable. To the point, my brother, am I talking too much?
No.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
My brother, the one who was born in Ireland as well, he's a doctor, and he, first Indian boy in the family. So although he's younger than I am, he's the boy, he's the man, he's the big brother. And he's, when he comes to Trinidad, all the old ladies want him to take their pulse and so on. And he's the golden boy. He's always been the golden boy. And then I got an honorary award from, by this time, Daddy he's becoming slightly demented, right? Mummy's passed away. He's becoming slightly demented, but aware enough. And So now Daddy's very excited because it's an honorary degree from Western University. I'm Dr. Mootoo, you know, like Daddy and like my brother. And I go home, he's at home, my brother is at home, everybody is at home, and my brother is sitting with my father in the bedroom. And the maid comes out and meets me, and she runs inside and says, Dr. Shani's has come. And Daddy gets up and he says, Dr. Mootoo, Dr. Mootoo. But the thing is, he couldn't remember when my brother came in, he couldn't remember who my brother was. But he was at that stage where he couldn't remember my brother. So, and that brother is the one I didn't show the book to, but. But everything is all right now, it's all good.
I've gotten the signal that we can open it up to the audience, so we have a question over here. I think Chris is going to bring a mic.
Yeah, over here.
Hi. Just to say, I just really, really loved your book. As you may know, we just did it at the Violet Hour Book Club. We had a wonderful discussion and a lot about how wonderfully you write the child's point of view at the same time as the adults get what's going on. And I also thought it was really impressive because I felt the child aging throughout the book, like the voice got older. But the question I have has to do with the father. And, you know, he's a character, he's a person who has very good values, good politics, he's progressive, he's very admirable in those ways, and, you know, wants to have fun, but he's not a very good husband. And the child in the story comments like, I'm not gonna be like my mother, she's too weak, you know, and I want to be like Daddy, except that I'm gonna be I'm gonna honor my wife, I'm gonna take her with me, I'm gonna hold her hand, I'm not gonna be a bad, husband like my daddy. And I was just wondering, and I thought, yeah, you really got it. You really understood the complexity of characters that could be good in some ways, bad in other ways. And I wondered if you thought that understanding might have come from being a person who's queer. That's my question.
Well, I wouldn't have known at that age that I was queer. I knew I was different. I had no idea that I would be queer, except that I had crushes all the time on my teachers, on my female teachers. But, yeah, I don't know. No, it's looking at the two of them and seeing always, when there were these parties that they would have and so on, the men got together on one side of the room and the women got together on the other side of the room, and the men would be laughing loudly and having a good time, and the women were sitting sedately or, I didn't want to be like those women. And I think that's when I began to see gender, or a difference in gender, and knew that I did not want to. I never thought I wanted to be a man, but neither did I want to be, I don't know what I wanted to be, but I just didn't want to be like those, and I wanted to be like him. It was about an exciting life. It was about who could leave home, leave the family behind, and come back at midnight with stories to tell, while the other one stayed at home and either was really, really upset. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Or telling, or reading to the children or something. Did you do your homework? Did you do your homework? So one gender was always disciplining. The other one was having fun. Those are the kinds of things that I saw as a child. And that's what you see in the book. The man who wanted to go out on Carnival Tuesday and jump up, and the woman who was, no, let's go to the beach, let's go to the beach, let's avoid Carnival. It was always the same thing.
Thank you, Sue. Another question? Over here?
Hi, Shani.
Hello.
It's been lovely hearing you talk about your book. We're also part of a book club, and we haven't read your book yet, as of yet. But I really enjoyed you talking about your process and how you were storyboarding almost image to image and trying to put voice to imagery and creating a story around it. I was just hoping you can maybe share maybe the first image you had in mind when you started the process of writing, or one that stands out to you today.
It's kind of interesting. Thanks very much for that story. Yeah. Also, thank you to the two book clubs that read the book, and to you all for being on the verge of reading it. So it started about 35 years ago, me scribbling these things. I don't really remember because I was going back and forth. There is a small manuscript. I call it a manuscript now. The very first thing that happens is the death of the grandmother. And that was when I had just gone to live with my parents. And they didn't really tell me what happened. And I kind of had to figure it out because of Mummy's, how she was behaving. And then when I went to the funeral, how that was. Like I disappeared from, I felt like I disappeared. And that's the very first thing in that manuscript. So I suspect that's what I first wrote. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Another question? Over here.
I have a question about something that you mentioned at the very beginning, which was, I want to know how you convinced your editor to ditch the narrative arc, and what that actually gives room for once you're not tied to that anymore.
Right. You know, it's kind of funny. I feel that arcs, thank you very much for that. I feel that arcs are always leading to some kind of conclusion. Everything's going to wrap up and then you will understand what came before. I don't believe that you can understand. There are things that happen that you can't understand. And you just have to accept that they happen. And if you wrap it up, it's like you almost make an excuse for them happening. So I just stuck to my guns, and then through the editing process, my editor was Anne Horowitz in New York. She was she was fabulous. She understood, and she said, "No, don't do it." And one thing that they did see, now that I've said what I didn't do, that they said I should do, I'll say what I did do that they wanted me to do. They saw the movement of the books, of the houses, from one house to the next until the really nice house at the end. And they said that they would advise that I structure the book by neighborhoods and the houses that I had moved through to, because they really played a very, very big part in the sort of evolution of the family. And I'm really glad that I did that. She thought of it as architecture of houses and architecture of the book. So.
If I can ask just a question too, just because the Violet Prize is a career prize and your first book came out in 1996, so that's 30 years ago. Can you speak maybe briefly to like what you've seen changed in 30 years of publishing in Canada? I guess either as a publisher, because you've been published with big presses like multinationals, you've been published with indie presses. What have you seen maybe change over that time, whether or not it intersects with like queer writing in Canada?
Thanks for that, Chris. That makes me want to bring up something that I still feel a little uncomfortable about. So, yes, we are seeing some queer writers being published by the big presses. We're seeing people of color, because there are all these intersections that I fit into, so I don't, I see them all, right? So I don't really see all the time good commitment to a single writer. I felt like I benefited from that for some strange reason. When my work came out, the presses stayed with me, right? And I changed from what I did not get kicked out by a press. They didn't say no to me. I chose to go with Book Hug because I was not happy with I felt everything that was being doctored for a more straight audience, for a more white audience. In fact, I had one experience where I was being asked to tailor the book to a different kind of audience, to a pure white audience, and straight. And I couldn't understand it, so, But this is a thing that bothers me. Maybe one or two people will get constant good attention. But there is the reason that this prize means so much to me and makes me so emotional is that if you look at all the prizes given for books, not for career, but for books. I said this to somebody the other day. How many queer people have made it, not in the first 5, but to the top? And she went and did a search and said, "Oh, Shani, you're so contentious. Look, I checked, and there are like about 200 prizes given, and there were like about 6 with queer people. So, I think it's easy for us, and this is juries. Juries are made up of a range of people, but I think it is still not comfortable for a queer book to make it all the way to the top. I might be wrong about what I'm saying, but that sure seems like that, Chris.
I think we have time for one more, Geeta.
I just want to say, as a reader, the idea of having a book that doesn't resolve, that trusts the reader, that has more self and less help, I'm just like so excited. So I just wanted to say that. And the other thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry, I'm standing in a way that makes it hard for you to see.
No, you could just stand over there.
This way. I actually wanted to ask, because as a writer, I imagine you are torn between your commitment to the work, because each work has its own voice. I don't know if that's how you experience it. Some works are really bossy, some works are really quiet. Then you have your commitment to the reader and how much you trust that reader to partner with you in interpreting the work. And then there's the game, capitalism and all the crap you have to pull to get past the gatekeepers. How do you navigate that?
Thanks. I don't. I can't think about those things. I love the writing so much, and what I love is playing with ideas and also trying to figure out how to write a sentence that is it could not have been written in another way. It has to be written this way to express what you want to say. So it's like a game, an internal kind of game. When it's not finished until I've done it, until I am satisfied. And then I get very excited to show it to my publisher or my agent. If they come up with themes, and it's one of the reasons that I left and went with a small press, if you're going to give me a cover that's going to be speaking to people or ideas that I feel are to sell the book and not really to say what the book is truly about, I'm not interested. So I think I'm just plain lucky that I have a good publisher to help me do what I want to do.
All right. Well, thank you, Shani. Oh, another. Oh, yes. Okay. Hold on.
Can I just say one thing? You arrived at that place very early, because when I read The Cirrus Blooms at Night, I felt that every sentence was important in that book. And I just really, I didn't realize it was 30 years ago that you wrote that book, but I've been wanting to say that for 30 years.
Well, that is the note to go out on. So thank you for sharing that. Let's give another round of applause to Shani Mootoo and also Eva Crocker. Thank you both for an amazing conversation.